No one was prepared for what happened in eastern Afghanistan on August 31st. What seemed like an ordinary day turned into a nightmare when the earth began to shake with brutal force. The epicenter was located near Jalalabad, a few kilometers from the Pakistani border, in a mountainous area where communities live between narrow valleys and remote villages. The earthquake reached a magnitude of 6.0, but its shallow depth made it a devastating event. In a matter of seconds, walls built of mud and stone collapsed on entire families. Flimsy roofs collapsed, and many villages were reduced to dust. People barely had time to react. Kunar and Nangarhar provinces were the hardest hit. In districts like Nurgal and villages like Water, Shomash, and Mazarura, the scene was bleak. Destroyed homes, blocked roads, and hundreds of people trapped under the rubble. The magnitude of the disaster was reflected in the figures that quickly began to spread. More than 800 lives were lost, and the number of injured exceeded 2,500, although the UN warns that this figure could rise to 3,000 in the coming days. The survivors' accounts are harrowing. Some managed to escape their homes seconds before the collapse, while others saw their loved ones buried before their eyes. The destruction was so severe that dozens of villages practically disappeared from the map. The weak construction, based on fragile materials, could not withstand the violence of the earthquake. More than 12,000 people were directly affected. Entire families were left homeless, and hundreds of houses were reduced to piles of stones and mud. Rescue efforts were complicated from the start. The mountainous terrain and landslides blocked roads, making access impossible for heavy vehicles. Many communities were only able to receive help on foot or via helicopter. Despite these difficulties, emergency teams managed to carry out more than 40 rescue flights. Thanks to them, at least 420 seriously injured people and bodies of victims were transported to regional hospitals. The Taliban government declared a state of emergency and requested international aid. Humanitarian organizations, such as the International Red Cross and the UN, sent medical supplies, tents, drinking water, and specialized personnel. 30 doctors were immediately deployed, along with tons of medicine and basic food. But the magnitude of the tragedy makes these efforts seem insufficient compared to the pain of thousands of families. The aftershocks have also not given respite. More than 5 earthquakes greater than 4.0 magnitude and 2 measuring 5.2 have kept the population in a constant state of panic. No one sleeps peacefully. Each aftershock rekindles fear and also delays rescue efforts, as teams must interrupt their work to avoid being trapped under further landslides. In hospitals, the situation is chaotic. The hallways are packed with the wounded. There's a shortage of beds, medicines, and blood to treat the avalanche of patients. Many are receiving care on the floor under minimal conditions. Meanwhile, families of the victims desperately search through medical centers and makeshift morgues, seeking news of their loved ones. The international community has begun to react. Neighboring countries and global organizations promise to send aid, but geographic isolation and lack of infrastructure mean that support is slow to arrive. Rescuers who have managed to enter describe heartbreaking scenes. Mothers crying over the ruins of their homes, barefoot children searching for water, and elderly people who have lost everything in a matter of seconds. The fear of further landslides keeps thousands of people living outdoors. In makeshift camps, families gather around fires, trying to withstand the cold of the night. The tragedy has once again highlighted Afghanistan's vulnerability to earthquakes. The country lies at the intersection of the Indian and Eurasian plates, a highly active seismic zone. Throughout its recent history, Afghanistan has suffered multiple similar disasters. But this latest earthquake is shaping up to be one of the deadliest in the last decade. Pain is mixed with uncertainty. Many fear that, in the coming days, the death toll will continue to rise as access is gained to still isolated villages. Search teams are working against the clock, hoping to find survivors under the rubble. Every minute counts, but time is ticking. In the hardest-hit villages, people are trying to organize themselves. Some dig with their bare hands. Others lift stones in silence, hoping to hear a voice that will restore hope. The disaster distinguishes neither age nor gender. Among the victims are women, men, the elderly, and many children. Stories that are repeated in every corner of the tragedy. Despite everything, scenes of solidarity have also been recorded. Neighbors helping neighbors, families sharing what little they have, and volunteers risking their lives amid the aftershocks. But the magnitude of the pain is enormous. The bodies that continue to appear under the remains of collapsed houses are an open wound that reminds us how fragile life can be in this region. The echoes of this earthquake are not only felt in Afghanistan, but throughout the world. The international community watches with horror and compassion, aware that the country is facing a humanitarian catastrophe without recent precedent. A feeling of abandonment runs through the faces emerging from the rubble. With each aftershock, hope fades a little more, but solidarity emerges with strength. Neighbors, their hands stained with dust and tears, become improvised rescuers, tearing away chunks of mud and stone with urgency and desperation. In the hospitals of Jalalabad and Nangarhar, the scene is almost apocalyptic. Makeshift beds in hallways, blood on the walls, and exhausted doctors fighting against a relentless clock. Amid the chaos, the cries of mothers clinging to their children can be heard, and the constant blare of sirens fails to calm the echoes of heartbreak. The international community watches with alarm what is happening in Afghanistan. Organizations like the UN and the Red Cross are bringing aid, but the road is as winding as the mountain trails that mark the boundaries of the destroyed villages. Each truck is difficult to get through, and every second counts for those still waiting to be rescued. Amid the lament, stories of strength emerge. A teacher who rescued 2 children from under the planks of his house with his belt. The heartbroken nurse who used her coat to provide warmth to victims on the side of the road. These are fragments of humanity in a devastated landscape. the prognosis worsens. Recent rains have left the ground fragile, and the threat of further landslides looms over the survivors. Authorities warn that one misstep could unleash another tragedy on makeshift squares of mourning and grief. Meanwhile, the Afghan government, with scarce resources and diminished international aid, is promising reconstruction funds, but remains unclear how this aid will reach the most remote corners. In a country fragmented by geography and conflict, building is not just a matter of cement, but of trust. In Kabul, a special committee is meeting to coordinate efforts, sending supplies, mobilizing brigades, and contacting foreign agencies. But every decision is fraught with uncertainty, damaged roads, a lack of trained personnel, and the specter of future earthquakes.